There's someone coming in
I'll just go and get...
Welcome, Victoria. So you're here to do 2 in a row?
Yes.
Yep.
And with your permission, if possible, if the trust exceeds its time, my submission overlaps with the Civic Trust. So would that be acceptable if we
Have they not done
merge
this
into my time? Or if there are questions?
yet? Has the Civic Trust not done this yet? No.
Is that on?
10 minutes in total.
Yeah, so it's 10 minutes in total?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And is there somebody who could distribute this paperwork to the counselors, please? And I'd like to introduce Mike Norris, who's the chairman of the Akaroa Civic Trust, and Chris Mangles, who is on our board. So Mike will actually be presenting the submission, and we'll let Mike lead off.
Okay, thanks, Victoria. First of all, this is our first appearance in front of the new council. A few familiar faces here and a few not so familiar. I'm not sure if Tyrone's here today, is he?
Yep, it's right there.
Oh, yeah, good, good. Welcome, Tyrone, to your new lofty position. I noticed that the mayor is absent, so we're very pleased to be in front of you, Pauline.
Oh, yeah, I know. I thought you might be. That's
Yeah, well,
good.
we've discussed things before. And the Civic Trust always likes to try and produce a lively presentation because there's quite often a lot of fairly solid stuff you have to cope with. So, first of all, may I just ask amongst the assembled multitude, how many of you have never visited the Britomart Memorial in Akaroa? Hands up if you have not. That's interesting, okay. So forgive me, therefore, for a little bit of background. Victoria has produced an excellent summary for her submission, or our submission, but it is predicated on having some awareness of the history of what caused the Britomart Memorial to be erected. It was erected in late Victorian times to do with Queen Victoria's Jubilee years, and it commemorated the arrival in 1840 of a British corvette, the Britomart, which had been up in the Bay of Islands, and Governor Hobson and co had overheard that the French ship, the L'Orbe, and what was the other one, Comte de Paris, were making their way to Akaroa to set up the French flag and declare a French settlement. So the Britomart sped on its way, made a record journey, and got there 1 week before the French did, and therefore the flag was planted at what is now the Britomart Reserve on Stanley Point there. Now, it's been much in the news of late in council context because, much to your credit, the Christchurch City Council and Onuku Marae have conceived and executed part 1 of the Takapuneki Historic Reserve, which was the focal point of our Matariki celebrations last year. And there's obviously a stage 2, and I think it's really heartening that this week Rick Tainui of the Onuku Runanga expressed strong support for what the Civic Trust is advocating, that we take a look at the Britomart Memorial and at last wake up and do some work on it, because we've been talking about this for years. Even in 2018, the City Council set up a working committee to decide what to do with it, but like a lot of things, it went down a rabbit hole and got nowhere. So we have been nagging the council for a long time, and there couldn't be a better moment to bring forward some plans, if there are any, to properly develop the site. So it's worthy of being a good neighbour to Takapuneki, because they're right next door to each other. And you've done such a wonderful job at Takapuneki. And by contrast, the neglect at the Britomart Reserve is palpable. If we could have the picture of the Britomart first. And so that's what it is, designed by a local architect, S.C. Farr, and erected really to commemorate the arrival of British shipping to Akaroa in 1840. And if, in my opinion, and a lot of people share this, that puts the Britomart Reserve and this point on a par with Waitangi in terms of its significance nationally, because it was after the massacres of 1830 at Takapuneki and another one at Onawi in 1832 that I think the Maori community were very keen to have some support from a British government, and they were very happy, I believe, by the time 1840 came round, to be signatories to the Treaty of Waitangi. So I think Little Akaroa's Takapuneki and Britomart Reserve can lay claim to being right up there as a reserve of national significance. And the fact that, and there's no shame on you that you haven't been to see it, those of you who put your hands up, it's a fairly anonymous and inaccessible memorial. So, Victoria, if we can have a look at that other slide with the relationship to...
It's not moving.
Isn't it? Oh, well, I can add lib.
Oh, there.
Yeah,
There it
here
is.
we go.
Yeah.
It's in a pretty bad state of disrepair and neglect. The approach is past fallen tree stumps. It's tatty. There's no disabled access. And it is a very poor sister to its elegant neighbour, the Po at Takapuneki. So we don't think it's very difficult to find a reason to suggest that funding should be made available. I personally had been prepared to go out and find a sponsor to fund the cost of doing some interpretive panels and bringing this up to a standard that we could be proud of. But I was persuaded by colleagues on the Civic Trust that it's not the responsibility of a private donor. It's fairly and squarely in the council's domain. So I hope that you see it that way as well. It's, let me say, the obvious areas would be disabled access, landscaping, and interpretive panels. It's never going to become what it should be if we don't take this opportunity of spending some time and some money on it. So I'd welcome the council as the opportunity when you next come to admire the Po and the Takapuneki Historic Reserve as you move into stage 2, that you take a look at the Britomart Memorial and realise what a state of dilapidation it's in and how much it could be improved.
Thank you.
Could I just add too that we would like to support and compliment Rick Tainui and Debbie T. Cowell for what they have been able to achieve with the support of Christchurch City Council in developing the first phase of Takapuneki. And we're very, very pleased in the second phase, which this slide shows, that they have provided a link to the Britomart Memorial. And what that means, I'm not quite sure, because as soon as you access the memorial, it's overgrown in 2 to 3 meter bush, and there is no formed footpath. There is no access from Beach Road, except for an awkward flight of stairs and a bare piece of earth. So they've taken it up to a point which we greatly appreciate, but we would ask the council to take the next step and build on a very important report that was commissioned through Banks Peninsula District Council, which was a conservation plan for the Britomart Memorial by Ian Bowman, who's one of the most highly regarded conservation architects in New Zealand. This was published in 2002, and it's been on the shelf ever since. There's been no conservation work. There has been no landscaping. When I was there last week, the grass has not been cut, and all the broken tree branches are just thrown over the fence line. There is zero regard for one of the most important historic sites on the South Island. And it sticks out like a sore thumb right at the time, as Rick said yesterday, you've got hundreds of groups coming to Akaroa now to view Takapuneki, in addition to all those school children who utilize the Akaroa Museum. They come through town, they will be visiting this historic site and going on to Anuku Marae. It is a minor amount of money and a very minor amount of effort to take it to the next step. You have the in-house facilities to do that. You have a very competent heritage team and you have a parks division. And if we could work in association with Anuku Runanga, they have an excellent program and they have proved what can be achieved. Everything is in line to make that closer association with the Britomart Memorial. And the time to do it is now with a small amount of money, seed money, to start that process in place. So the only other part of our submission really is that we remind you to adequately fund the Akaroa Museum. It needs operational funding per annum. It is a huge resource, not only for the community, but also for our local businesses who survive on tourism, because it is a visitor facility. It accommodates numerous school children, school groups. I was talking to the director yesterday, and the number of school groups coming through is just skyrocketing because of Takapuneki. So it's a council facility. It's run on a highly professional manner, and it's very, very important, not only to us in the community, but to all visitors coming to Akaroa. So we do appreciate your support. It's probably one of the most outstanding regional museums in the country because of its high professionalism. And basically, we're just asking that you pay attention to Banks Peninsula as much as possible, because this is on everyone's radar now.
Yeah.
And especially with regard to the Britomart Memorial, we'd like to move that project forward sooner rather than later.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Our time is up, but look, I will allow, there's two questions, Tyler and Kelly.
Is
You
that
wanna
our 10
trade
minutes
with
up or 5 minutes?
Well,
It's on 10. Doesn't time fly? when
Yes,
you're
it
having
does. Okay. Oh, okay. We've had a cancellation. So is everyone okay if we go for a bit longer on this? For a couple of minutes? So that means we can have the three questions.
yeah, thank you.
Tyler, Kelly and Tyrone.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Just for a bit of background, Uncle Rick is a relation of mine through other runanga, and he actually talked about the Britomart Memorial, of which I haven't visited, but I've visited the bays. I'm not telling you what diving spots there are, but I was wondering, he did highlight that the Britomart Memorial itself would like a little bit of TLC. Could you elaborate a bit more on that and your views on the repairs that the memorial itself might need?
The the memorial itself has not seriously been looked at since 2002 when Ian Bowman was here. It requires cleaning on a regular basis. My concern, personally, is through the earthquakes, if the earth has actually slumped. I went out after the September quake that afternoon and checked the Britomart, and one of the plaques had fallen off. It seemed to be okay, but over the course of the past 10 or 13 years, there are bigger and bigger cracks because it's got a concrete retaining wall that was installed in around 1840, and the cracks are just widening, and there's no one gauging, what is actually happening, what's causing those cracks.
In the interests of time, I think we would need to get staff to have
Thank
a bit
you.
of a look at
Thank you.
that. And Kelly, can we make our questions snappy? Please?
Oui, bonjour. Merci pour votre présentation. I'm glad my English ancestors came here before my French ones. I think it's wonderful that you guys are representing this part of our history, and I love the fact that you're talking with Mana Whenua about this. Have you discussed with them a general partnership to look at doing something together?
I, through the Civic Trust, have worked very closely with Anuku Runanga for almost 25 years, with George Decal, Piri Tainui, and Rick Terry Evison, a number of people who it's been a privilege to walk alongside. The Civic Trust has always strongly supported and fought for Takapuneki. And Anuku Runanga has recognized this, and they're coming along in support of us now to have the Britomart Memorial put in its rightly state and position and condition. The original conservation report, which was completed in 2008, joined the two sites. They were one. And then Anuku Runanga, through several of the members, said they wanted to have a separate entity because of the vestiges of colonialism, which is totally understandable. So the site was basically divided and separated off. And now there's a new understanding or a more viable approach in that it's more unified again.
Sure.
So I'm hoping now, I see Rick Tainui on occasion, and we have numerous conversations, and I'm hoping to meet up with he and Debbie T. Cowell, the landscape architect, in May, because their expertise and what they have achieved on that site is just stupendous. We don't need to recreate the
Exactly,
wheel.
work
We need to
together.
follow what they have led.
Thanks.
How much do you need, do you think?
I have no idea.
We don't know yet.
Okay.
Tyrone. But we
Kia
will
ora.
find out.
Thank you. I'll make this. Thank you, Mike, Victoria, and Chris, for your very comprehensive submission. And I happened to be at the Akaroa Museum yesterday, and I can assure you what an incredible asset that is for the city. And there's an amazing exhibition of photography on there at the moment that I would encourage everyone to attend. But my question is, I understand there's currently an application in progress to make I'm not sure if it's the Takapuneki site or the Britomart site or both combined, but for national reserve status, which I understand council is currently handling. And I would imagine you would like an update on that,
We
and
would,
where that's at. Yeah. Would that be a fair assumption?
Very much so.
Yes, and unfortunately, my understanding is it's specifically for the Takapuneki site. In my view, it would be nice if the two sites were jointly recognized because it's an interwoven history. But
Sounds
that's not
logical,
my call.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
So should we make that as an action to get some information?
It would be good if council was kept closely informed, especially since Carmel Sepuloni spoke at Matariki as the representative from government, and she's now Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Culture and Heritage. It's a very good opportunity to follow up as quickly as possible.
So I'll just check that we've got consensus around the table for us to follow that up. Is everyone happy with that? And then also the other, cheers, and Tyrone's, have you? So the other thing was to, I was just wondering if we could dig out the Banks Peninsula Conservation Plan of 2002.
I can email a copy to you.
Would that help, Lynn?
Look, I'm sure the relevant staff will be able to come back with an update on
And also
this.
to remember that Waitangi will be commemorated at Anuku in February.
And then the other, thank you, the other thing is, do we want staff advice on investigating the any operational maintenance work on the reserve and the memorial in Britomart?
So my suggestion would be that we pick this up with the head of service and identify where it is currently at and come back with an update to councillors.
Happy with that? Is everyone happy with that? Sarah?
My understanding, following from the email we got sort of at the beginning of the process, was that staff are currently going through every single submission and getting advice for us on every point that everyone is making on every submission.
Yep.
So all of that advice will be coming.
That's great.
Rather
So
than us asking
We
for
don't
separately.
need a specific action for every single one.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our
Yeah,
time. But
Thank you.
thank
Madam
you.
Deputy Mayor, may I just summarise one thing? You asked about the relationship with Onuku Marae, and I think Victoria has expressed that it is a very cordial one. And I think Onuku respect the Civic Trust for the intervention made mainly by Victoria and others in the early 2000s when a less enlightened council than you were proposing to subdivide and put into public or private housing the land that now occupied by Takapuneki Reserve. Got to remember, even in the 1980s and 90s, the council permitted a rubbish tip and a sewage disposal area to be located right there. And you look back now and you think, how could that happen? But it did. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, you're quite right. All right, we now have Mel Graham